We welcome our Nigerian viewers and viewers around the world. This is Business Week, where we offer you unique insight into the economies around the continent. We also zero in on the biggest news story in the world of business. I am Kelly Egiga, and I'm reaching you from Lagos, Nigeria's commercial capital. Now, in recent times, Nigeria has been faced with a lot of economic issues, such as high inflation rate, which is biting hard on many households across the country. There is also the crisis of fuel scarcity, forest crisis, poverty, amongst others. We will discuss the state of Nigeria's economy while highlighting some of these economic problems, causes, and of course, chart the ways forward. Well, this conversation will take center stage in just a moment. But let's run you through some of the stories that trended earlier in the week.
This morning, ladies and gentlemen.
The International Civil Aviation Organization's Air Services Negotiation Meeting, a platform for aviation stakeholders across countries to dialogue on bilateral, regional or plurilateral air services negotiations and consultations. Over 60 ICAO member countries with more than 400 participants are part of the gathering, both physically and virtually. Following lessons learned from the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on the global aviation business, countries are urged to rub minds in ways that shall be mutually beneficial to one another.
We are delighted to welcome almost 400 in-person and virtual delegates from over 65 ICAO member states worldwide. The attendance level is an important reminder that the progressive resurge of the air transport industry is proceeding at pace post-pandemic.
Nigeria, on its part, pledges support to the sector in other African nations to drive ICAO standards while championing the cause of aviation security on the continent. The authorities also say commitment to driving private sector investments into the sector will be sustained.
Having this unique and important event for the third time in Africa demonstrate ICAO's determination and interest to support the sustainable development of air transportation in the region, the African region. I therefore wish to take this opportunity to commend the ICAO under the leadership of Mr. Salvatore Shakitano.
Mr. President, I use also this opportunity to thank you for approving our roadmap, which has shown tremendous amount of growth, permitting Nigeria to debunk the general saying that aviation doubles every 15 years. Actually, aviation tripled within the first 4 years of the Buhari government.
Participants feel Africa needs to be better positioned for growth and effectively tap into unexplored opportunities which the sector offers.
It is a huge achievement that as we embark on this 14th ICANN meeting, we can already count about 160 states that have benefited from platforms such as these. It is my hope that we will add more similar success stories before the end of this week.
Amidst the harsh operating environment riddled with skyrocketing energy costs, rising inflation, foreign exchange scarcity, poor and inadequate infrastructure, amongst other sundry issues, young business owners in Nigeria have chosen to defy the odds and take the bull by the horn by starting and running sustainable businesses. They attribute their staying power to the spirit of resilience, innovation, and their desire to contribute their quota to the country's economic growth.
Youths are not lazy, and they are eager to succeed in Nigeria. Tonight we have over 50 young entrepreneurs who have been doing so well in various sectors of the economy: real estate, fashion, social entrepreneurship. They have been putting their best to create employment for younger individuals and also try and create promote Nigeria's economy.
They also bear their minds on the impact of the recent interest rate hike on their business operations and their expectations from government.
We have to be honest with ourselves. This is not a Nigerian thing. It is all over the world. In US, they've increased the interest rate several times. In the United Kingdom, I mean, they have done the same thing. So here, it's just because of our own peculiar challenges. But then I still see young business owners, I still see Nigerians forging ahead because we are very resilient. Whatever comes at us, we always find our way through it.
Running a business is not just about the good side, it's also about the bad side and how prepared you are. We could remember the COVID-19 and how it affected a lot of structures in Nigeria. To be very honest, I think that a lot of companies, smart companies, have been able to not just innovate, but also evolve over a period of time since the COVID. I think if we embrace innovation, things become cheaper and faster for us.
The Young Entrepreneurs International Summit is a platform aimed at solving global economic challenges through young business collaboration.
Welcome back and thank you for staying with us here on Business Week. Now to our big conversation. Nigeria is the most populous and the largest country in Africa. Yet the country is confronting economic factors and challenges such as unemployment, high inflation, fuel scarcity, forex exchange crisis, and poverty. Now, reports are also revealing that the country's economic growth will decelerate, averaging 3.2% during 2022 and 2023 due to persistent low oil production and, of course, rising insecurity. Meanwhile, inflation is projected to remain elevated and to stay above pre-pandemic levels in 2023, fueled by rising food, diesel and gas prices, as well as persistent supply disruptions, amplified, of course, by Russia's invasion of Ukraine. And speaking to some of these issues, earlier in the week, I had an exclusive and robust chat with distinguished Senator Victor Ndoma-Egba, a Nigerian politician, former president of the Calabar Chamber of Commerce, a senior advocate of Nigeria, and a former chairman of the Niger Delta Development Commission, NDDC, where Senator Ndoma-Egba also indicated strong support for the economic blueprint and policies, of course, of the presidential candidate of the All Progressive Congress, Asiwaju Bola Tinubu. Take a look. Distinguished Senator Victor Ndoma-Egba, thank you indeed for agreeing to speak with us and welcome to the program.
Thank you, Kelly.
So there are a number of issues of national interest that we would like to engage your views and perspective on. But let's begin with the past 8 years of this particular administration, the All Progressive Congress, and the state of the economy. What's your initial assessment of where we are and how much growth we have recorded in the country?
Well, you know, essentially Nigeria is part of the global community. There have been global economic dynamics, you know. First was the recession at the inception of this administration, which was a global phenomenon. Then there was the global meltdown. Then there was the Russia-Ukraine war that has inevitably affected global economies, including the Nigerian economy. Our own situation has also been exacerbated by the security situation, first in the northeast, and then it spread to the northwest, then north central, and the agitations in the southeast, and before now the agitations in the south. You know, so the economy hasn't done as well as it ordinarily would, you know, but it's probably the best that we can have given the global impact of events that are totally beyond the control of our domestic economy.
And of course, while we stay with the economy, it's also the fact that very recently, long queues have emerged in many parts of the country. There's a serious and severe fuel scarcity in the moment. You were in the Senate for 12 years. Perhaps give us an insight to what exactly some of the issues are.
There is this problematic issue of subsidies. And as far as I'm concerned, the issue of subsidies on petroleum products has provided the largest infrastructure for inefficiency and corruption. And for me, the long-lasting solution to the problem of queues and shortages will be the total removal of subsidies on petroleum products. so that the price of products will be determined largely by market forces. There will be initial shocks. Prices will go up. Inflation might rise. But at the end of the day, I think it will be in everybody's interest that this problematic issue of subsidies is done with once and for all. We've heard right from my teenage years, I've been hearing of subsidies. And I don't see how it benefits the common man at the end of the day. The subsidies is for the big men. It benefits the big men who have a fleet of vehicles. You know, so but essentially, the biggest infrastructure for corruption and inefficiency today is as a result of subsidies.
I mean, Mr. President and the Minister of Finance, Mrs. Ndoma-Egba, had said that would perhaps be removed by mid next year, somewhere around June. But I wonder perhaps if you think that some measures would need to be put in place, perhaps to help ease that particular transition and the impact, of course, on the common Nigerian, which you have acknowledged.
Well, I recall some years ago when we had to deal with the issue of subsidies, and they said they were providing palliatives. I remember our own Senator Basiewa Henshaw then, who represented Cross River South, now even sat on those committees, and at some point buses were bought, you know, to ease palliatives, but they were not sustainable. You cannot, the subsidy regime is too opaque, too inefficient for it to be sustained. So you can have some interventionist measures, some palliative measures, but they will remain palliatives. They cannot be long-term solutions to long-term alternatives to the removal of subsidies.
Distinguished Senator, well, let's talk politics for a moment. 2023 is just around the corner. Your party has a candidate in a two-term governor of Lagos State, and it is believed that he perhaps laid the foundation for the success of what is now termed Nigeria's commercial capital. Talk to us from that window about the economic blueprint of your candidates, Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu.
Well, let's talk about the candidate first. I mean, if you talk of Lagos, Lagos constitutes about 60% of the economy of this country. Planning for projects, but planning a succession that can ensure the sustainability of those long-term plans and the achievement of those long-term plans requires certain qualities. And I think he has demonstrated those qualities, because Lagos is one state where the quality of governors has not gone down. I mean, if they are not at par, they are improving on their predecessors. But they remain focused on the long-term plans they set out to achieve. Like President Buhari says, he's the best candidate for now, for Nigeria, and I agree with that. And we look forward to him replicating what he did in Lagos for the rest of the country.
And perhaps when you also look at some of his plans or visions or master plan, economic blueprints, perhaps if we stick with that description, factor in some of these global events. We've seen the COVID-19 pandemic, which had a lot of impact here in Nigeria, the continent, and of course, even the strongest economies around the world. We're not sure what will play out in the next 5 or 10 years if he eventually becomes Mr. President, and what he may do differently.
Well, for now, the blueprint is a blueprint. And it's been presented to us. I was in the audience that first received it as in draft form before it was perfected and then now formally launched in the presidential villa, you know. The blueprint has looked at key aspects of the Nigerian economy. And I believe that if you take oil sector, for instance. There is a commitment to do away with the fuel subsidy regime. And for me, just doing away with that, you have dealt with a mortal blow on a festering sore of inefficiency and corruption. I keep saying that corruption is a consequence of inefficiency. People take advantage of an inefficient system. They take personal advantage of that inefficient system, and that is what we call corruption. If a system is efficient, if it is transparent, if it is working, there will be less opportunities for corruption. So his whole blueprint is directed at maximizing efficiency and reducing personal judgment. We will have a set of rules, apply the rules, you know, and let discretion be reduced to a minimum level. That is my summary of the entire blueprint.
Because I was going to just ask, perhaps if you could even highlight other areas. There's power, there's agriculture. For instance, if you could also just highlight one or two other key
yes, of course.
sectors.
You know, the bulk of the arable land in Nigeria is in the north. And the blueprint looks at mechanized agriculture in the north, which will have a multiplier effect in terms of employment for the rural population. The moment you employ the rural population, you are mitigating urban migration, rural urban migration, and then the moment you mitigate that, you are controlling urban growth. So you can have long-term plans for both the urban centers and the rural centers. You take the ports, for instance. There's a plan to get the other ports to work outside Lagos. And if you were here, I think the early days of Donald Duke, when we had a few ships stopped by, and the impact of those ships coming through the Calabar port on the local economy at the time, then you can imagine what the multiplier effect will be. He has also talked about development of our gas. You know, with what we are seeing in Ukraine now, I think the rest of Europe and maybe the rest of the world will be looking to other sources for gas supply. And Nigeria is a gas nation. So why don't we take advantage of this situation and develop that?
Well, distinguished Senator, let's begin to wind down our conversation now. And it's a season of budget presentations. I mean, we've seen Mr. President present his, we've seen state governments. They are also beginning to present their budgets as well. Maybe we should start from the national angle first. And when you take a look at Nigeria's budget, what concerns you or worries you the most?
What worries me the most is the ratio between the recurrent and the capital budget. It shows a structural imbalance in our federalism. And I'll give you a bit of some background. If, you know, we started as 3 regions, and then we went to 4 regions when the Midwest state was created out of the Western region in 1963. And then we went to the 12-state structure by 1967. And then we had the 19-state structure, and then by 1996, we had the 36 states. Now, if you started from 1960 to 1996, that is 36 years. So in 36 years, we moved from 3 regions to 36 states. Now, go back to when you had 3 regions. What was the ratio between your capital budget and your recurrent budget? Recurrent was in single digits. So the more of the federating units you created, the narrower the gap between capital and recurrent. So by the time we got to 12 states, we had like 60 for capital and 40 for recurrent. By the time we got to 19 states, it was like 45 to 45, 55 to 45. Today, you have about 25, 26% for capital. And the balance of 70-something is for recurrent. It is the capital component of the budget that guarantees development, infrastructural development. It is from the capital. So the less of capital you have, the less of development you are likely to expect. So my biggest worry is that gap between our recurrent expenditure, which is just for maintaining government, maintaining government officials, running their offices, running their homes, and the limited amount that we have left today for capital expenditure. That is my biggest problem. And if you relate it to where we started, it means that the more we have of our federating units, or whatever you, or if you like, call them states, the more the recurrent component of our budget grows, and the capital component shrinks, you know. So that is the structural problem I see in the budget. And when you talk of countries that were our peers in 1960, Malaysia, Indonesia, Singapore, and India, what did they do that we also did? Indonesia had military rule, Brazil had military rule of a worse form that we had. So it cannot be military rule alone. But what is it that we did that they did not do? Our federating units moved from 3 regions to 36 in 36 years. They have remained basically the same. I think it's only Brazil that has created one additional state. Since then, their own federating units have remained exactly the same way they were in 1960. So you can now, in fact, for me, even though it requires further interrogation, but I think that that is one of the major reasons why the other countries that were our peers in 1960 left us behind.
And just finally, here in Cross River State as well, I wonder what you think the APC would have to do differently to perhaps win the hearts of the people.
Well, let's take from the PDP was in power for 16 years, and there's this claim in Cross River that Cross River is a PDP state. That is now highly debatable, because we were a PDP state because the government was PDP, and naturally the people followed. Now we have a government that is not PDP. What is about to be tested in the next elections is whether the people, as has been the tradition, also moved with the government. I suspect that they moved with the government, so we are no longer that PDP state that they used to talk about. So in terms of recognition, in terms of participation, in terms of that psychological satisfaction that we belong, we have had it better under the APC. In terms of infrastructure, new infrastructure, the 7 years of APC, have shown that we have benefited more from an APC administration. So I think the short answer to your question is that as Cross Riverians, we are better off with an APC government.
Distinguished Senator Victor Ndoma-Egba, it's such a delight and pleasure to speak with you. We appreciate your views and insights on the program.
Thank you, Kelly. Thank you, listeners.
And that exclusive chat with distinguished Senator Victor Ndoma-Egba, SAN, a former president of the Calabar Chamber of Commerce and a former chairman of the Niger Delta Development Commission. And it does it for us here on this edition of Business Week. I am Kelly Egiga, and from Lagos, Nigeria's commercial capital. Bye for now.